My name is Jaime Casap. I'm the Google Education Evangelist. One of them is to work across all the different teams that are doing things at Google to make sure that we're doing cool things in education, that we're responding to what education needs. I also sit on the board of inquiryschools.org, where we're focused on bringing student-driven learning into the education models. So I work with a bunch of people that we're a nonprofit and we do that. And I also teach 10th grade communication skills at a school in Phoenix. So, one of the questions I get all the time is, why is Google involved in education, or how is Google involved in education? I always like to remind people that Google has been involved in education since the moment Google was launched, right? Our mission is to organize the world's information and make it accessible and useful. And what is education if it's not taking information and making it accessible and useful, right? So the minute someone started searching for things, Google was involved in education. We formalized that a little bit when we started working with our tools and how they were being used in education. So Google Apps, that is now called G Suite, was a tool package that students were using, that teachers were using in the universities and in K-12, or what we call primary and secondary education. So that's how we've been involved. Since then, our team has grown and we're building a number of things, like Google Classroom is a tool that's specific for education. Google Expeditions is a tool that's specific for education. The computer science team launched CS First, which is a program to teach computer science skills in elementary school. So we're doing a bunch of things. Different teams are doing different things in education. So Generation Z, to me, there's different variables that you'll find. Some of them will say they're like those that are in college today. I like to look at Generation Z as those that are born after 9/11, right? That to me is a milestone in the world, right? And so those kids that were born after that or around that time. So my 16-year-old was 3 months old when 9/11 happened. That's the generation I'm talking about. The first true digital generation where they don't know what the world looked like before technology, before Google, before smartphones. That's the generation I'm talking about, Generation Z. They're also very, we didn't get a chance to talk about this in the keynote, but if you think about this generation, they are the 9/11 generation. They only know a world of terrorism and global problems. They only know a world of climate change, right? It's a very different world that they're growing up in. And they're also the first Great Recession generation, right? They're the generation that had to watch their parents suffer through work. They watched their siblings go to college and come home and not have a job, right? So that's the generation we're talking about. So they're worried about things like the planet. They're worried about things like work. They're worried about their careers. They don't want a job. They want an experience. They want to have an impact. And you can start seeing that with those 16-year-olds, those 15-year-olds in Florida, for example, and the impact that they're having on gun legislation and issues in America. That's where that generation is. They care about things like that. Right. So if you think about the skills that Generation Z will need, they're basically the skills that we've been talking about for a long time. Problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, communication, and I would add curiosity. Right? This idea that you're constantly learning, constantly moving forward, constantly iterating, working on projects. Those are the skills, the human skills, if you will, right? So I told my 16-year-old, look at a job and ask yourself, can a machine do that job? Maybe not today, but in the future. And I walk around the world thinking about that, right? So a couple weeks ago, I was walking down the street and I was walking by a tall building and I saw people cleaning the windows in the building. That's a skill that some robot's gonna do pretty soon, right? That's an easy job to clean or to replace. But here, for example, in a hotel, you think about maid services, that's not so easy to replace, right? There's so many variables. When you walk into a room, there's so many things going on. There's no way you can, at least now, program a robot to take all that information in. So that's more of a human skill. So I ask 16-year-olds to think about jobs as whether they're human jobs or machine jobs or future machine jobs, and you can start seeing the patterns pretty quickly. So it's the skills are the human skills, the problem-solving skills, the creativity skills, the original thought. Those are the things that this generation needs to focus on. Content is a great thing, right? You need content, you need context, you need those things. Those skills, the problem solving, creativity, curiosity, computational thinking, those things you can build into any learning environment, any lesson plan. I'll give you a quick example, even 3-year-olds, right? So my 3-year-old is a natural problem solver, right? She's always trying to solve problems. That's what she does. I was teaching her computational thinking skills a couple months ago when I walked into her room. We were getting ready to go out to the mall. We were gonna go shopping. So I walked in her room with my t-shirt on top of my head. And I said, okay, I'm ready to go. And she looked at me, because like I'm strange. She goes, that's not where your shirt goes. And I said, where does my shirt go? And she goes, it goes on your body. So I took it off my head and I put it on my shirt, on my body, and it kept falling. I'm like, it's not working. She goes, no, it goes in your arm. So then I take it and I squeeze the whole thing in my arm. I'm like this? She goes, no. And then she takes a step back. She goes, no, you take the holes, and then she starts walking me through how to put on a shirt, computational thinking. So you can teach these skills in everyday lessons, whether you're teaching history or whether you're teaching baseball or football or any sport. Those skills apply across the board. The class that I teach, the communication skill class, I could do it the traditional way, right? I could give them a lecture and say, these are communication skills that you need to have. Now, here's your homework. Go home and write a speech, or write an outline for a speech, right? That could be an assignment. And then they go home and they do the speech, or they write their outline, and then they come back, and then I grade them, right? I could do it that way, and that's the traditional way. Or I can actually have them build their outline in class, where I can be there coaching them, right? Think about sports, right? It's like teaching football, right? If you're teaching a kid how to play football, you don't show them how to kick the ball in the net and then say, go home and practice that and then come back and I'll test you the next day. You stay there and you teach them, right? And you watch them kick the ball, and then you help them, right? That's the same thing in learning, right? So taking that outline, creating that outline in the class with you there, so you can guide them and be there for support. That's the difference. They get to drive the learning. They're learning. You're there as the coach, helping them along the way. So again, it's moving from the traditional world where our job as teachers was to put all the information into kids' heads. We don't need to do that anymore. So what we need to do now instead is take the information that we have and have kids do something with that information. So it changes it. It almost changes it. Like, one of the words that you hear in education a lot is teacher as a facilitator, right? You hear that phrase. I don't like that phrase because a facilitator is there to kind of provide a framework or a guidance, right? So think about, again, football. Who's the facilitator in a football match? It's the referee. The referee there is to make sure that both teams are playing fairly, to punish people when they do something bad, right? And then to keep the score, keep everything fair and even. And then when the match is over, they walk off the pitch and then you don't see them anymore. I don't want teachers to be facilitators. I want them to be the coach, right? The coach who can't play, but sweats and screams like they're playing, right? Like that's the role of a teacher, as a coach, to be there. And also the role of the coach is to put the right team together, right? When to substitute somebody out, when to bring the right, what team do you put on the pitch to begin with? Those are all roles that teachers need to play. Right, so assessments have to be more real, right? So we know, science, research shows us that if kids memorize facts to take a test, that we know that 3 months later, they forget like 90% of the things that were on that test. Like if I gave you a test that you took when you're in level 12, do you think you'll do well in that test? No, of course not, right? So we know that that's not true, so why are we still doing that? Assessments should be in real time and provide feedback for the students. Right now, assessments are about adults, not about students. So we take a test, we give kids a test, and then we see how the adults are doing, because that's what we use as a measure. That doesn't do anything for the kids. So assessments have to be built in real time. Again, back to sports as an analogy, right? So an assessment of a match is the score of the game, right? So what's the assessment of working on a project? How are you providing that kid feedback in real time? That's assessment. Getting rid of grades, getting rid of these landmarks that we've used in traditional sense doesn't make sense anymore. Real assessment You know, I ask people all the time professionally, in your job, do you get grades at the end of the year? No, you get feedback. You get what you're doing well, what you could be doing better, how to improve yourself, how to get it to the next level. Those are the types of things that we need to build into the assessment models. Technology is amazing. I remember when I was a kid, when I needed information, I used to have to go to the library. And I played basketball, and the library was closed at 5 o'clock, and I played basketball till 4:30. So I had to run to the library to get 20 minutes of library time. It wasn't open on the weekends, and it wasn't just my library, it was everyone's library. So when I looked for a book, it wasn't there. When I tried to find material, it wasn't there. When I tried to use the microfiche machine, they were all packed and busy. That's not a good way to get to information. Kids used to have encyclopedias. Remember encyclopedias? I was too poor for an encyclopedia, right? We had M, right? We had the letter M of the encyclopedia. That is no longer true. We now have the world at our fingertips, right? So let's forget technology. It's the information is at our fingertips, and technology has been around forever, right? You drive a car, you're using technology. You fly in an airplane, you're using technology. I want us to stop talking about technology in education and just talk about education. We don't talk about tech banking, right? Or banking tech. We don't talk about healthcare tech, right? We talk about healthcare. We talk about banking. We don't talk about technology in other industries. Let's stop talking about technology in education. This is just education. Technology is there to support and enable what we do. So if all we do is take the technology and put it on top of our current models, then all we're doing is making the old model faster and more efficient. What we need to do is create the new models based on the future that we're facing, and then ask ourselves, how do we use technology to improve those things? So here's what I think motivates all of us as human beings, right? It's three things, right? Daniel Pink talks about this in his book Drive. What motivates all of us as human beings, it's purpose, mastery, and autonomy. That motivates all of us. So for a teacher, they have purpose, right? Teachers have all the purpose that they need. They have to go find a place where they can have autonomy, a place where they're going to be let to do what they do best. And then mastery is about always improving your skills, right? Like reading the research, being on top of what the latest trends are, just always teaching, always learning. I think that's the most important thing that teachers, anyone can do. Yeah, so I've had some great educators in my life, but the one that sticks out for me the most, there are two examples. I'll give you two of them. Number one is my 4th grade teacher. Up to 4th grade, I would do minimum work and hand it in and get A's on everything. I was a smart kid, right? I got lucky. I remember handing in a current event paper on my 4th grade teacher, and it came back all red, full of marks, and didn't even give me a grade. She's like, and other kids that I wrote better than were getting good grades, but she personalized it for me. She said, "You're smarter than this. You can do better," and handed it back to me. And that kind of drove me that I was comparing myself to other kids and not comparing myself to me. So from that moment on, it made me I made myself compare myself to me and nobody else, right? So I think that was an important life lesson for me. And then the second one is my 9th grade teacher. I thought I was terrible at math. Didn't get it, wasn't very good, got bad grades in math. But what I realized, when my 9th grade teachers taught me math, I saw math in a completely different way. He had some magic when it came to math. He showed me algebra, and I got it. It was like being inside the Matrix. And I think that's an important fact, is this idea that teachers drive the learning or the guidance for kids to learn. And that taught me that I can learn anything if taught the right way. Yeah, so I think it's great. I think this conference is amazing, right? So I looked at there's a map that's right there that shows you all the countries that people are from. And so what's amazing about this for someone like me is that there's 85 or 75, 85 countries represented here. Everyone is here and everyone cares about the same thing. So this is a global thing. the issues around how do we use technology, the issues around what do the models need to change. So I get to talk to 80 different countries and have an impact on a global scale. That's why I think it's important to be at an event like this.